Thank you. Agenda item 2, declarations of interest. Members should declare any financial and non-financial interest they have in any item of business at this meeting, identifying the relevant agenda item and the nature of interest. Do we have any declarations of interest? No. Agenda item 3, minute of the meeting of the Scrutiny Committee held on the 14th of January 2025, pages 3 to 11 on your agenda papers. Can we agree the minute?
Agreed.
Thank you. Agreed. Agenda item 4, rolling action log, and go to Mr. Perry.
Thanks, Convener. The rolling action log is just a list of the items that have been requested by committee for future meetings. You can see that items are in progress for roads performance and building maintenance, the mid-year performance report. There's a follow-up report, and that's on today's agenda. And then the Falkirk Complaints Annual Report is the last one, and that's coming to the committee in June. So everything is progress or on today's agenda.
Thank you. Agenda item 5, 2023-24, Achievement of Curriculum of Excellence for Excellence Level Outcome Report, and it's a report by Director of Education, pages 15 to 66 in your agenda papers, and we'll go to Jill.
Perfect, thank you, Chair. This is just to introduce this year's Curriculum for Excellence Levels attainment paper. Obviously, through education, there are a number of attainment papers we are going to bring to scrutiny. This one specifically is around the broad general education, so that is education from early level in primary 1 all the way up to the end of S3 in secondary school. So that attainment is measured through achievement of a Curriculum for Excellence level. That means teachers making teacher professional judgments around achievement of a level at primary 1, primary 4, primary 7 and S3. That information is then collated and shared, collated across the entire authority and presented at those levels. Sorry, can you hear me okay? Yeah, sorry, I'm just checking. I see you playing with microphones. I'm just checking you can be heard. Okay. There are going to be subsequent papers. We're going to submit a paper on secondary attainment also, and SEF, which is Scottish Equity Funding paper, which is the GAP. So this one specifically around broad general education. In terms of the outcomes of this report, we're really pleased with the attainment that's recorded and reported in this particular paper. It is the culmination of a huge amount of work with our schools and local authority colleagues, just ongoing work around attainment and raising attainment. Our head teachers do an outstanding job of working with attainment data and improving outcomes for young people. Personally, having come from another local authority and having had an eye on attainment data across the country, I think we perform particularly well as a local authority, and I'm pleased to report the outcomes in this particular report. Thank you.
Thanks very much. It is indeed an excellent positive report, and all the stats are really good. So my first question would be, what were some of the challenges to try and get to there, to get to that high standard, sort of above the national average?
Thank you, Chair. I think there are obviously challenges in education generally around the recovery from COVID. There were a few issues with obviously interrupted learning through COVID and the attainment that followed on from that. I think we did particularly well through that period and managed to maintain a really high quality learning provision throughout the sort of the COVID lockdown period. There are obviously ongoing there's ongoing work associated with young people with an additional support need, for example, young people who have lower than expected or hoped attendance. Schools really do work through a lot of different types of issues in terms of making sure that these young people's attainment is not impacted. I think they do an incredibly good job, and that's a testament to them and the tracking and monitoring they do, and the real focus on getting it right for every single child in every single school. I think it's very much a case of, if we've got high quality leadership in our schools who have a real focus on getting it right for every child and individual learner journeys and are really meticulous around that, it's almost like if every individual is looked after at that level, then it means then when you start to aggregate data at higher levels, it really does show a really positive picture across the entire authority.
just wanted to ask, we're coming on to the next agenda item. It's feedback on the health and wellbeing improvement projects. You think that has made a difference? People's mental health and wellbeing has maybe had an effect on the attainment? Positive effect?
Sorry, Chair. Yes, absolutely. Yes, particularly around the COVID times as well, there has been a real focus on mental health and wellbeing and young people who are experiencing mental health issues as a result of lockdown, etc., and just generally socially, etc. At the moment, there is obviously an increase in mental health awareness, etc. But again, I think it's something that, because of that good work, that head teachers and strong leaders in our school, classroom teachers, etc., really do have a real understanding of every single young person in front of them. And with that in mind, then it's about all the different interventions and all the different things we can do to support young people to continue to attain.
Thank you. We'll now open up to members for questions. Councillor Kelly.
Can I ask, Jill, why was SC selected for the current ACL 23-24 report? I'm thinking that when in year one, they're doing this changeover from primary to secondary, and that would show up perhaps more how strong the change was from year one to year 3 or year 5. So I was just asking why.
Thank you, Councillor. It's a good question. So essentially, a curriculum for excellence levels, as submitted to the Scottish Government, are submitted at certain stages. So although young people are doing assessments in every stage throughout the primary school and the secondary school and early years levels, we only submit data to the Scottish Government for reporting in primary 1, primary 4, primary 7 and S3. So those stages are the end of a particular curriculum for excellence level, and S3 is the end of a particular curriculum for excellence level, which is why that's reported. So it's not to say that schools don't gather information in S1, S2, S3 and ensure interventions and report on data in S1, S2, S3. But as far as publicly accountable data, it's at the end of S3. So that's why we've represented that in this paper today.
Thanks a lot for that. That explains a lot. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor Flynn?
Yeah, sorry, I think Sarah was before me, but I put my hand up too quickly. Yeah, first of all, thank you, convener. Many congratulations to everyone in the Education Department on this excellent report. It really is very, very positive indeed. It's really good news. And the fact that we've overachieved above the national average, if we took Falkirk out of it, then the national average would have dropped down. So it's even better than that, But my couple of questions really relate to two things. One, how much do you feel that the introduction of iPads across all our pupils had a positive impact on the results? Because we were ahead of the game, I believe, ahead of many authorities on that. And the second one, Gillian, you mentioned COVID, and it was a dreadful experience, but there is a positive aspect of particularly lockdown, because I believe that many children would get far more exposure to one or both parents. And I think that may have had a positive effect as well in conjunction with the iPads. Would you agree with that?
We'll just go over to Mr. Reid to answer that question.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Boris. Thanks, Councillor Flynn. I was just going to come in very specifically on that iPad feature, because iPads are one tool that teachers use to help young people with their learning and teaching, but there's a whole vast array of features called accessibility features. And these are tools and features contained within apps and in the software of the iPad that allow young people to independently access their own learning. So they're not waiting for somebody to come around and help them, which does happen, of course, but they're able to get on at their own pace. Whatever their particular additional support need is, those inbuilt features are playing a really significant part in supporting young people with additional support needs. So I have no doubt that the impact of that technology is contributing to increased levels of attainment in different types of young people, but particularly within those within additional support needs. And what you'll also see coming through in the inspection reports that we've had recently, particularly within our primary schools, is that mention of digital learning and how teachers are using it to support young people in classes as well. So I think it's got a significant impact, and we're beginning to see the evidence of that.
Good. It's great to hear that. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Reid. Thanks, Councillor Flynn. We'll now go to Councillor Patrick.
Yes, thank you, Joe. Again, I'd want to back up what Councillor Flynn has just said about it being an excellent report, and we should be very proud of the hard work of all our staff. I appreciate that there is a report going to be coming to full council, but I wonder if you had any information you could share about any continuing funding from the Strategic Equity Fund. Well, that obviously has been very important in past years. Is there any indication if that's going to continue?
Mr. Reid.
Thank you, and thanks, Councillor Patrick. Our understanding at the moment is that the strategic equity funding will be continuing. We don't have exact detail yet. All we know is it is going to continue, because obviously we had anticipated that the Scottish Attainment Challenge funding, strategic equity funding and pupil equity funding was coming to an end. It's been confirmed that it is going to continue. We just don't know by what mechanism and by what level, but we hopefully will receive that detail in the next few weeks to allow us to plan ahead.
Excellent, thank you. I look forward to hearing further detail.
Any other questions? Councillor Kelly.
Just on what was said earlier there about the handhelds, it says at 524, in previous years, the proportion of pupils achieving the expected curriculum for excellence records across each primary school was highest in listening and talking and lowest in writing. Is this perhaps because we're using laptops or handhelds?
Can I just go to Mr. Perry just now?
Thanks. It's absolutely not to answer that question. It was just to say that there is a report on the committee planner on the Scottish Equity Fund for the May meeting. So we would get more information. Just I meant to say that when Mr. Reid was speaking.
Joe?
Thanks, Councillor. I think, yeah, listening and talking traditionally as an attainment measure has sat slightly higher than the other organisers. Generally speaking, when you look at literacy as an entire measure, it's made up of reading, writing, listening and talking combined. And across those three, pretty much across the country, listening and talking does fare higher than the other two. And that has been a trend of that for a long time. I mean, there is no doubt that the sort of the digital access we have and the iPads, etc., will support that as well. But I think on top of that, that there is a trend of that nationally. We don't know whether that's just to do with the way that it's assessed. We don't know whether that's just because young people are more saturated within the listening and talking environment throughout their career, etc., or throughout their learning. But that tends to be the trend, that listening and talking does sit slightly higher than the other organisers. But there is no doubt that collectively that the digital iPad access for our young people is having a positive impact across the board.
Thanks again.
Any other questions? Councillor Aiken.
Hi, morning. Again, just as everybody else says, it was a really positive report, really pleased in particular to see that the gap between the most and least deprived children is reducing. I was just hoping you could tell me what it is that we actually do to reduce that gap, and how do we intend to continue improving on it?
Jill.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor. So, as we've spoken about already, we are bringing a fuller Scottish Equity Fund paper to scrutiny in May, which will have much fuller detail. But generally speaking, yes, we are very pleased with the way that we are managing to do work to close the gap at the moment. I think we're seeing real movement across a range of measures in terms of the gap closing. There are some areas that we've got a little bit of an increased focus on because they're maybe not moving to the same extent, the gap's not closing at the same rate. We have a range of work to try and look at interventions to try and close the poverty-related attainment gap. At an individual level, schools are working very hard on individual interventions for young people from areas of deprivation to ensure that their barriers to learning are overcome. Senior officers within the authority work one-to-one with head teachers and school leaders around what that might look like in their individual context, because looking at aggregated data, that obviously hides a number of areas where you might have one school that's slightly lower and another school that's slightly higher. So it's really important that we look at the nuance that sits underneath that, and that's where our central officers work. We provide sort of a central data portal, essentially, and we work very closely with senior officers to try and understand where schools might have bigger gaps, where they might need increased focus, where schools themselves are looking at that, and that forms part of an ongoing conversation with school leaders about what is happening, how PEF's being used, etc. And schools are obviously very well versed in that now and are very good and familiar with doing that work. In addition to that, we obviously have more recent Scottish strategic equity funding, and that sits at local authority level. So what we're able to do is look at trends and patterns in the high level attainment data at an aggregated level. And what we're starting to do is we're starting to consult with head teachers around things like what would a local authority numeracy intervention look like? What would a local authority literacy intervention look like? So we had an equity conference at the end of February to explore just that. So as a local authority, we do want to do a little bit of work on closing the gap in numeracy, because we know nationally even, and in Falkirk that's replicated, that there is a bigger gap by the time it gets to S4 with numeracy. So what we're trying to do is look at a comprehensive strategy for looking at numeracy pedagogy to try and continue to close that gap. I think, again, we're starting from a position of strength, though we already are seeing movement in these areas. But what we want to do is we want to get to the point where we're really seeing that gap continuing to close. So thank you.
That's brilliant. Thanks very much. Sorry, I do have another question. I don't know if this will maybe be answered at the later meetings, but the attainment gap for the most deprived and least deprived children in primary 4 has widened slightly since the last academic season. Just wondering if you could tell us why that is.
Again, I think yes, it's the gap in P4. It's marginal. I mean, it's very, very close compared to previous years, but we do know that that's one of our areas that's maybe not closing as rapidly as we would like it to. And that is, again, we've got primary 4 numeracy, literacy, reading and writing are the areas that we are kind of putting a slightly more intense focus on at a local authority level. I think often primary 4 is an area where attainment data does dip nationally, and I think we're just following a bit of a trend there. But I think generally speaking, we are performing well even at that level. It's just that obviously it's probably not quite as strong as other areas that we are performing well in. But needless to say, we are looking at, and I think the numeracy intervention that we're looking at probably will start around the primary 1, 2, 3, 4 level, although it will spread out across other stages as well, and with a view to trying to continue to close that gap. I think generally speaking, if you look at primary 4 data, there is often a slight dip at that point, and I suppose that gap data is replicating that a little bit. But again, though, I think it's important to stress that what we're looking at here is a really, really strong profile that we want to do better in. I think in terms of value added as an authority, we add a lot of value. I would just like to make sure that that value is being added at the same rate in primary 4 as it is in all the other areas as well. Thank you.
That's brilliant. Thanks very much. I've got one final question, and I think you've already answered that in your summary, to be honest. There's no information on the attainment gap for S3 pupils. Just wondering why that was. Well, for the most deprived and least deprived.
So we're going to do. I popped in some gap data within the paper just so that it was for a little bit of context. We are going to bring a fuller paper with the whole gap in May committee, at which point we can kind of explore that more fully. But yeah, that's what we're looking at moving forward.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Councillor Mickey.
Thank you, convener. As everyone has said, it's a very positive report. I do have a couple of wee queries, and I'm hoping that the questions that I pose here will look to improve the report as well, or certainly the information that the committee will have in front of it. Jill, paragraph 4.8, it tells us about quintiles 1 and quintiles 4, quintiles 5. How do we measure these quintiles? Can you give me just a brief, or would it be better if you emailed me later on just to give me some background detail into how we actually? I'm curious to find out. You know, we have a quintile 1 to a quintile 5. What are the differences? What's quintile 2, 3, and 4 to actually get to that? I'm just curious about the detail. Knowing a wee bit more about that detail, I think would eliminate some of the detail contained within the report.
Yep.
Thank you, councillor. You'll not have to fight me to have a conversation with you about data, so I'm more than happy to follow up with you as well. But essentially, there is national census data is used to understand the demographic or the context of the people living in particular areas in Scotland. So they take a map of Scotland and they split it up into data zones. They then use the census information to do an analysis of what they call deprivation in a particular area. So they look at 7 domains. Those domains are around, for example, access to GPs, access to transport, access to schools, access to park and rides is another one. So generally they look at geographically, based on that area, how deprived they are of services, etc. So they do, they look at economic information, they look at crime in the area. And then what they then do is, based on that information from the census, they then take every little data zone in Scotland and they rank them from the most deprived data zone to the least deprived data zone. So I think there's about 6,000 or 7,000 data zones in Scotland. What they then do is they divide that up into 5. And the fact that the 20% or the fifth that are most deprived become quintile 1, and the 20% or the quintile at the end becomes quintile 5. So you've then got the most deprived quintile and the least deprived quintile based on the geographical positioning of these people's homes or these children's homes. And what you then do is measure the attainment of the children living in this one compared to the attainment of the children living in this one. But there's obviously nuance that sits within that, because young people will experience financial poverty that has nothing to do with the geographical positioning of their home. So there's lots of nuance that sits there. But essentially, that's how the quintile 1 versus quintile 5 is measured. So it's a national measure to measure quintile 1 and quintile 5, and then we apply that to the young people we've got in schools to understand how the attainment is concerned. But again, I'm more than willing to have a bigger conversation about that if you would like.
I was warned, don't ask her the question. She'll come back at you with all sorts of detail. Fantastic. It really was. It's very illuminating. Thanks for that, Jill. And I would look forward to, you know, delving a wee bit deeper into that. There's a wee thing I picked up on just looking at the paperwork, and it's to do with S3 as a cohort. S3 seem to, I don't want to say be outperforming, but is that a thing that happens, you know, where you have a good year of pupils? Obviously, you would recognise that. How does it impact the tables? I mean, it's good at the minute that S3 are in here. You know, next year when they fall off and we get less able than S3, do they come in and are our figures therefore going to presumably dip next year or whatever? Any insight into that, Jill?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor. I think I think, again, I'll come back to the fact generally we have a very strong attainment profile. And I think our S3 attainment is possibly just a version of that, or that is just showing that. I think if you were to look at our S4 data, so in S4, young people go on and start doing their qualifications. We perform particularly highly in literacy and numeracy in S4. Now that is official data that's reported through SQA qualifications, etc. So it's data which is out there and it's verified through the SQA. So that is a definite known. And I think our third year data aligns with that. So although our third year attainment data is achievement of a level information and it is created via teacher professional judgment, it does align with the performance we have in S4, the strong performance we have in S4. So I think we do have a strong picture in S3, and I think that is likely to continue. And the chances are, based on sort of historical trend data we've got, we'll probably see that coming through next year as well. I think the only thing I will say is that this type of information is what we call year-on-year data. So it means we take S3 and we measure S3 every year. And you quite rightly pointed out that will then have cohort differences, and that will always be the case. It's very difficult to sustain an improving trend of data when you're looking at year-on-year data, because it is a different cohort of young people every single year, or children every year. However, again, we're still managing to do that, but there will be a point, obviously, where we might have cohorts of young people that are maybe not quite so highly performing. And I would hope through interventions, in both through CEF funding, but also general classroom interventions, that they then have been supported to perform at the same high levels. But again, there will always be slight cohort differences. However, the strong picture we have in third year is very much verified by the strong SQA performance we're seeing through into S4. So it is a very positive picture.
Thanks very much for that, Jill. One wee quibble that I have is at paragraph 5.2.1, where you mentioned the expected levels, CFE levels, 23-24 have increased across P147 literacy and numeracy compared to 22-23. See where you do that. Can you give me 22-23 so as I can have a look at it and just come? It's it's a statement which is unsupported. I'd just like to see the evidence to back that up. It's just a personal quibble of mine. That's purely all that is. I don't doubt the figures for a minute. I think that's me finished, convener, and I look forward to the May report with the equity funding details at the back of that, I'm sure. And I'm never going to ask you a question again. Thanks very much.
Mr. Reid.
Thanks, Provost. Thanks, Councillor McCabe. It's just to confirm that information, I think, is in the paper that you're looking for. It's from pages 22, it looks at numeracy, and page 23 and page 24 looks at numeracy, and then the rest follow on from that, and that's P147 together. I think that's what you're after, but if I've misunderstood that, then please let us know and we'll get what you need.
In all honesty, John, I don't know if that was what I was actually asking. I'll get back to you on it. Thanks anyway.
Great, thank you.
Okay, I've just got a couple of questions. All the data on the pages where you go, authority was 12th highest or 4th highest or 8th highest, which is commendable, really commendable. Go through the data and sort of prioritise where your focus needs to be. If something's 15th, you go through all the data there and say that's where your focus this year is going to be.
Thank you. Yes, that's something we would do at a local authority level. So we spend time with central officers to understand where our gaps are as well. I mean, obviously, schools analyse their own data and identify where their gaps sit at a school by school basis. And we will then do that at local authority level to look at where our gaps are. We do that both with what we call excellence data, which is the top level data, which is the entire cohort of young people, but also the equity data, which are the gap information. So yes, we would do that. And we also use this data to inform our improvement plans in terms of the central service and officers that we have. So if we know there's a particular area that needs a focus, we would have, so as a for example, we have got a quality improvement officer who has a curriculum remit. And it could be that we then look at data and say, right, well, there's a particular issue we're looking at with numeracy. So then there would be a bit of work that would be led by the quality improvement officer who has the curriculum remit on numeracy specifically, to try and look at that and improving that. And I think, again, with a big local authority and lots of data, it does change. So it's important we look at trends so that we make sure that we're deploying resource to make sure we're looking at a trend. Because as Councillor McCabe quite rightly pointed out, sometimes cohorts change and you might see an underperformance in one thing that then doesn't follow through the following year. But yes, we have a strong central data team who is very, very good at providing us with all the data, which then allows us to look at analysis and then understanding where our improvement plans and our service plan needs to point to make sure that we're improving outcomes in those areas.
Okay, thanks very much. Mr. Reid.
Thanks, Provost. And just really for member awareness, the other thing that I don't know if everyone will be aware of, but a number of our officers are involved with Education Scotland and national partners in driving forward improvement, particularly in literacy and numeracy. So we're really grateful for the experience that they get from doing that work and what they bring back to Falkirk. And we then work with that and work with our head teachers and apply that in our schools. So it's a real benefit and a real strength of our central team.
Thanks very much, Mr. Reid. And do we still have the collaborative, you know, where we meet up with other schools to share information?
No, there's the regional improvement collaboratives have more or less come to an end now, but the work and the relationships that we developed as a result of that are ongoing. So we just work semi-formally with our schools in West Lothian, Stirling and Clacks, and individual schools will also have really strong relationships both in primary and secondary with schools within the RIC, but also across Scotland as well. So everybody's making networks and connections which will help benefit whatever it is they're needing to improve. They're going out there, they're having a look, and they're bringing stuff back into Falkirk to see if it works for our young people. Okay,
thank you very much. So in summary, I think we all agree it's a fantastic report, and it surely is a testament to the effort that the pupils have put in, particularly as we came out of COVID and we sort of recovered from that, and the effort of all the teaching staff and everybody at every level in education. I mean, for me, and I think everybody here would say, I mean, education's one of the most important things, you know. It changes people's lives, you know, and I think to see these figures today is quite remarkable, and it shows that Falkirk's doing really well, and I think everybody would agree with that. And so, well done to everybody involved, and thank you for coming along today. Thank you. Councillor Mickey.
Thank you, Provost. I wanted to catch your eye just before you spoke there, but it's basically just to echo what you have just said there. If we have a look at from pages 22 to page 30, just a quick glance at that, you'll see the bottom graph. There is a direction in the right direction, you know, where we're improving year upon year until we get to 23-24, when we're seeing the lowest figures there. So we are moving in the right direction. I'm just going to throw the wee caveat into there that getting to that stage is the minimum that we should then be looking at. And I know that speaking to John and to Jill there, I have no doubt that we will be determined to improve on that. I'd like to see every figure, you know, over the next couple of years under 10%. Whatever. I realise it's a target, it's an aim, but well done, and I echo your comments, Convener.
Thanks very much, Councillor McCabe. Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Mr. Reid. So the members are asked to note the good progress Falkirk Council primary and secondary school pupils are making in the broad general education Can we agree the report?
Agreed.
Thank you. The next item is agenda item 6, feedback on the 2024 health and wellbeing improvement projects, pages 67 to 112 on your agenda papers. Is that Gillian that's taking this?
It will be Provost, but just before she comes in, just to set the context for this, this was in relation to a question that was, or a request that was, point that was raised by Councillor Binney at the last scrutiny meeting in relation to data that was reported in the council plan in the mid-year public performance report. So Gillian was the driver in all of this work, and Councillor Binney just asked for some further information on the health and wellbeing sleep improvement projects, and Gillian has put together, which I think is a very comprehensive, detailed report, and she'll take you through the highlights of it.
Okay, thanks very much, Mr. Reid. Over to you, Gillian.
Thank you, Provost. Delighted to bring this report detailing some of the improvement work in Falkirk over the last year. We attached quite a detailed appendix, a background paper, how we arrived at the decisions on some of the topics that we were going to look at in terms of health and wellbeing improvement. And so the three that we focused on were sleep, which was a multi-agency approach, a peer-led vaping project at Grangemouth High School, and our managing improvements work, which focused on a variety of topics, including attendance, implementation of decider skills approach, and staff wellbeing. So happy to take any questions people had. I realised there was a lot of information contained within this report.
Okay, thank you. It certainly is a comprehensive report, and people do struggle with their mental health and wellbeing. And I think it's covered a great deal of detail on how we can support pupils to help them achieve. And so I'll just open up to members for any questions. Councillor Patrick.
Yes, thank you, Provost. Yeah, it was really interesting to read these different projects, and it was a bit thought-provoking myself when I was reading it kind of late last night, thinking about what time I was going to bed and how many hours sleep I should have. So it's something we could all learn from. And I really just wondered, have these just been one-off projects, or is there any plan to expand to other schools? And if there isn't, is that because we don't have the money? Or is there another reason? Because I appreciate that's always a fly in the ointment. But is that something we're looking at running again and extending?
Yeah. Gillian?
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, is the answer to that. The sleep work is already moved on to work in about 10 different schools now this year, so we've really made good progress with that. And we're also sharing that information in other ways. So I'll be at one of our schools on Friday to do a parents' sleep cafe. So they couldn't commit to doing the whole year-long project, but looking at how we can use what we've learned from schooling in other ways. In terms of the vaping work, we did find that peer approach to vaping went down really well. We've shared that with all the other pastoral teams in the other secondary schools, and they're looking at for next session how they can use that work. Vaping is something that's contained within the curriculum anyway in personal and social education, but just hearing the messages from other young people seem to just hit differently. So the other schools were really interested in that, and I think that's something that will progress. The managing improvements work, where we did the variety of projects, one in particular around attendance, we've taken aspects of that and followed up with a new approach this year using inclusion workers to work between home and school to focus on attendance. So our work around that with Larbert High gave us some really good information that could move us in that direction. So yes, they weren't one-off of projects. We've looked at how we can use what we've learned to move forward with other schools.
Yeah, thank you. That's really encouraging. It just seems that they're, we should learn and carry on and share that to all our pupils. And I think as parents and family and whatever, we could all learn a bit from it as well. So that's very encouraging. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Sorry,
Sorry, morning. Just many of the issues that are tackled by the project take place out with the home, meaning it's the parents and the guardians that play the most significant roles in this. Are you seeing any difference between the most deprived and least deprived quintiles? If so, is there kind of plans to tackle that?
Gillian?
Thank you, Provost. Thank you, Councillor. Yes, if I speak first of all about the sleep work, that was really interesting, and our approach was to very much have parents on board with us from the outset, parents and carers, because we knew we were asking for changes to be made at home where we couldn't really affect what time young people were going to bed and what their routine was. So we've now run this project in a number of schools. I would consider School A to be a more deprived area, and School B that we worked with was far more affluent. Sleep seemed to be an issue across the board. So the sort of the figures for sleep in School A were slightly poorer than School A even at the outset. The issues can change, but again, we decided on sleep as a really good inroads to talk about many other factors that can affect. So it's a really non-threatening way into a conversation about mental health and well-being. So at parents' events, we could engage in conversations by starting to talk about sleep, but then offer support around other areas of mental health support for adults, vaping, substance use, all things that can affect sleep. It's just a nice non-threatening way into some of these conversations to support families. So certainly around the sleep work, the levels of deprivation weren't a big impact on the levels of sleep. It seems to be quite an issue across all our schools, which was something that was picked up in the original census in 2022.
That's great, Gillian. Thank you.
Yes, thanks very much, Councillor. Mr. Reid?
Thank you, Provost. Councillor, can just picking up to add to what Gillian said there, that there's a plethora of work undertaken by schools right across all of our sectors with families, and it's based around the stat that, and I think I've got this right from my memory, that 80% of how a young person performs at school is related to what happens at home. So it's really important to work with parents and families to influence and to help support them, to help support their child to achieve as much as possible at school. So it's perhaps a paper we will maybe bring back to Scrutiny just to further exemplify the wide range of work that's taken place, because it's a central part of what schools now do. So it might be interesting for members to know that.
Yeah, thanks, John. I think actually I would really like to see that brought forward. It's something that I've got an interest in, so that would be brilliant if you could. Thank you.
Yes, thanks very much. Councillor McCabe?
Thank you, Convener. Gillian, on page 83, there's a couple of points where it mentions anxiety with pupils. Can you tell me how that anxiety manifests itself? I mean, is it due to falling academic performance, or is it behaviour or whatever? I'm just curious personally how it manifests itself. Do the pupils self-refer, or is it being picked up by teachers?
Gillian?
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, anxiety is actually our highest presenting issue across all our different mental health and wellbeing services. The highest numbers for anxiety seem to be around the 12 to 16-year-old age group. But anxiety kind of manifests itself in lots of different ways, and we know we support sort of mild to moderate anxiety right through to more sort of severe cases through our mental health and wellbeing services. So it's brought to our services in different ways. Young people in Falkirk with our Tier 2 community mental health and wellbeing services can self-refer, as can parents, carers, and there's obviously a lot of referrals come from education and other professionals as well. Something we're looking at the moment is trying to make the system for accessing support for mental health and wellbeing a little bit more straightforward for families, and we're investigating a single point of access for services. But yes, the anxiety is really quite different in different places, yeah, we're seeing that, as I say, highest numbers coming through our services because of anxiety.
Just a wee follow-up on that, Gillian. Would you be able to say, is it more young girls that are coming forward with anxiety problems, or boys or whatever? I'm just curious. Obviously, social media has got a massive influence in our kids nowadays. So that's the benefits of it can be very good, but the downside of it can be very damaging. I'm just curious, are you finding it more the girls are approaching seeking some assistance?
Yes, the data, sorry, Provost. Thank you, Councillor. Our data around this is really quite interesting. In the younger age group, the sort of 5 to 10-year-old age group, it tends to be higher numbers of boys referred, and it's not so much for anxiety, it's for emotional regulation, learning how to manage their emotions and behaviours. Our figures for kind of 10 plus, and then we go all the way up to 24 or 26 years of care experienced. Anxiety is by far the biggest presenting issue, and it is mostly girls. I think the figure will sit around the 70% of referrals across all issues at that age group are from females, and that's similar nationally. So that's been an area that we spent a lot of time on. We actually do quite well in Falkirk in terms of males getting support. I think at the moment we're about 8% higher males accessing support for mental health and wellbeing than nationally, but it is an area that we're constantly looking to improve on, because we know that the suicide statistics, unfortunately, go the other way, and it's around the sort of 70-75% mark are males. So yes, it's definitely something that we keep a really close eye on with the data.
Thanks for that, Gillian. It's absolutely fascinating. I can totally understand, the 5 to 10-year-old young boys, whatever, they've not quite got into know how to behave in normal society. They just want to get in there and break things and do whatever. But then when you move on, you get the young girls who are getting peer pressure from social media, whatever, body shape, anything, you name it. And then, of course, as you say, latterly, maybe some older males not able to cope, and unfortunately, suicide rate goes up because of that. It's absolutely it's worrying, but it's fascinating. But thanks very much, Gillian. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Councillor McCabe. Gillian, do we have mentors in the school where the older people just look after the younger people that are maybe just coming into the high school, or fourth year looks after a second year, just to give them some guidance, sort of peer-led?
Yes, Provost, we do. We have a very successful mentors and violence programme around domestic abuse, and that runs in all 8 of our secondary schools. But we also have mental health and wellbeing ambassadors in, I think, 3 of our secondary schools. And that's an area we're having a mental health for schools event in June, and we're going to be highlighting that practice because we think it's really excellent. St Mungo's is the one that comes to mind right away. They've had that in place for a while now. And as you suggested, it is the senior pupils taking on responsibility in talking about mental health and wellbeing and working with younger groups. So yes, again, it's another example where peer-led education can be really impactful.
Thank you. And just on the vapes, is there any data on people smoking vapes that then are going on to smoke cigarettes?
I believe Health have just pulled together some data around this. Updated. Our initial data came from the Health and Wellbeing Census in 2022. That was paused this year. We expected it to run again. So we don't have updated figures on that from our end, but I believe there's a paper being pulled together that might share some of that information.
Yes, thank you. Any other questions from members? No? Well, first of all, I'd like to thank Councillor Binney for asking for his report to come forward. I found it very helpful. I'm sure other members have as well. They get a deal of detail in that, and it's good to see the level of support that the pupils are getting. Parents are getting as well, or the offers there anyway. It covers a great deal, and we do live in a society where you hear all the time anxiety, depression across the whole of society. Because it's the world we live in these days, and it's how you manage that and navigate yourself through that. So I'm really glad to see that this is actually in place in the schools, and it's more than welcome. So thank you very much for that. And Mr. Reid.
So that was my mistake. I meant to say I would come in, Mr. Reid. It was just to summarise the decision. So it's to note the report, but also Mr. Reid did undertake to bring it back on the factors outside the classroom, so we can liaise with him on a date for that to come back.
Thank you.
Can I give the report?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Okay, thank you. We'll now take a 10-minute comfort break. Welcome back, everyone. Agenda item 7, scrutiny panel review of the contact centre, pages 113 to 125 in your agenda papers, and I'll go to Mr. Perry to have a wee chat about the report.
Thank you. Thanks, Provost. Yes, good morning. This is the report of the scrutiny panel, which looked at the contact centre performance. The report sets out the work of the panel and its recommendations. So I don't intend to go through the report in great detail. I think it speaks for itself and shows the good work of the panel, but wanted to make some general statements about the context and the background to the review. The panel was set up in December 2023 by Council, following a recommendation to Council by this committee. The committee had asked for a report on the contact centre performance. This was a request from members of the scrutiny committee considering a different report, because members had anecdotally heard complaints from constituents, etc., of the time taken for calls to be answered at the contact centre, and members wanted to look in more detail. So the committee received a report on the 7th September, which gave performance information for the years 2019-20 through to 2022-23. And in the year 22-23, 270,172 calls were handled by the contact centre, 66% of which were answered. The average waiting time for 2022-23 was 7.12 minutes. So recognising that the performance of the contact centre, which was the public's first call, reflected in the public's perception of the council and the need to drive improvements, the council agreed to a review by the scrutiny panel. The panel was set up by the scrutiny committee at the first meeting in 2024, and the panel comprised of the Provost, chaired the panel, Councillors Binney, Devine, McCabe and Patrick, and the panel met 6 times in 2024. It's probably worth stating just at the start that both at the committee, when it considered the report, and throughout the work of the panel, the Provost, as convener, stated that the aim was to help improve performance, and it was not to be I suppose, a hatchet job. It wasn't to be critical, and it wasn't to be negative of the contact centre itself. The panel was supported throughout its work by Anne-Marie Nielsen and Ian Whitelaw, both of whom worked constructively and positively with the panel, and with Kenny Gillespie's here. Kenny Gillespie attended a couple of meetings too, and the panel wanted to thank them for their work. The panel was also supported by Douglas Garner and Robert Fotheringham, and again the panel wants to thank them for the input to the work of the panel. So the panel's work, which is set out in the report, breaks into 3 main areas around services, staffing and public perception. In regard to services, the panel found the most obvious way to reduce waiting times is to reduce calls, and the most obvious way to do this is service improvement. The panel focused on BMD, and you'll see that in the report, and this is reflected in the report, but it's unfair in a way. That was the service which had the most number of calls at that time. It was a snapshot, and the panel focused on that to make the bigger point that it was service performance. If it improves, across the board, then the number of calls to the contact centre would reduce. Beyond this, the panel made 2 further recommendations about services around improved call handling procedures and the communication between services and the contact centre, particularly around times when service delivery is due to change. In terms of staffing, during the course of the review, the number of contact centre had increased by 1.8 FTE. It had reduced the previous year, so it's taken it back to the position it started at. And clearly there's a direct link between staff numbers and waiting times. The panel, however, noticed that improvements could be made around training and how emails were dealt with, the latter being particularly inefficient, the panel found, with double handling. The final aspect was public perception, and the panel, as we saw earlier, saw the direct link between call waiting times and public perception of the council. Call waiting times improve, then perception of the council would also improve. They made recommendations around publishing live call information online to allow the public to determine the best times to call, and to advertise using a public information video to highlight the way in which the public can contact the council. There's more ways than contacting the council than just phoning the contact centre. The video itself highlight how calls are handled and show the good work of the contact centre staff. And the panel noted during its work that surveys of people who had called the contact centre always spoke favourably of the contact centre staff. They might not have been happy with other aspects, but the contact centre staff were shown to be exemplary throughout. So it's, in terms of public perception, it's worth in this forum highlighting that call waiting times compare favourably with public sector organisations and utility companies. The current wait time is now 1.19 minutes. So that, if you remember, goes back and compares more than favourably to the 7.12 minutes back in 22-23. So the panel hopes that its recommendations, which are set out in section 2 of the report, will help lead to further improvements. Thank you.
Thanks very much. I would personally like to thank the officers who took part in this: Mr. Nielsen, Mr. Gillespie, Mr. Gardner, Mr. Whitelaw, for all the support and the transparency that they brought forward. You know, everything we asked for, we basically got. You know, and it was brought forward. And we had a visit to the contact centre as well, which was really helpful. I'd also like to thank Councillor McCabe, Councillor Binney, Councillor Devine, Councillor Patrick for sitting on the scrutiny panel and having these 6 meetings and trying to look positive and no criticise the service, who had been under a lot of criticism for the public, their perception, of course. But I think we have moved forward a ways, and there's still the recommendations in the report. There are 12 of them, and I think this will indeed move things forward again. But we have improved significantly. You know, it's really quality service, and it does actually highlight where the issues lie. I mean, when we started looking at it, you're really not sure where the issues lie. But I think I'm sure everybody found it quite worthwhile to actually get to where we are just now. So I'll just open it up for the members for some questions. Councillor Kelly.
Thanks, Provost. First of all, a wee hole in my knowledge. What is a RAP code? In item 4, it's menu options and RAP codes. Could you tell me what a RAP code is?
Yourself.
Yes, thanks, Convener. You'll be pleased to know that we don't sing to the customers in a RAP format. What it means is that we select an option when the call closes from a drop-down list to indicate what type of call it was. So we might say it was to follow up a repair, it was to report a missed bin, etc. So that gives us data on what the types of calls were.
Right, thanks for that. Just was totally confused. I didn't know. As I said, I didn't know if you sung to them or what you're doing. Can I ask, section 7, it acknowledges a significant percentage of contact calls relate to building maintenance division. What were the problems in BMD that caused this?
I don't think we're really focused on that at the minute, Councillor Kelly. I think that was
Right.
aye.
Okay.
Thanks. Just for your information, the committee had previously considered other reports on BMD, and there's reports coming back, and help get an understanding of BMD and how they work, which might help answer some of the questions. Douglas Garner is inviting the committee to come down to BMD to see how it operates. So that might give it a better flavour than perhaps an answer here could do.
Good, I look forward to that. Do we use the feedback to prevent future problems coming up? You know, when we're looking at the feedback we're getting from the contact centre, how do we use that to make sure we don't have a bigger problem in a year's time or 6 months' time?
Thanks, Convener. One of the things that we've introduced in the past year is that we produce quarterly reports for services that shows the number of calls they've had and the reasons for the calls using the RAP codes. And we meet with them to talk through what is this telling us, what can we do to prevent the calls in the first place, what information do we need to give to the contact centre staff to be able to respond to these calls better. But in the main, what we're hoping to do as a contact centre is drive down the number of calls by addressing it at the first point.
That's great. At least we're using the feedback, and that's important. Okay, thanks very much.
Any other questions? So just on the Councillor Flynn.
Oh, thank you, Provost. Firstly, I would just like to say, well, to thank and congratulate the people that work in the contact centre, because a little bit like a GP surgery, when the phone rings, you know that the person at the other end isn't phoning to say, how are your holidays? How are you? Well done. They're phoning with a complaint, you know. So it's quite a challenge to obviously handle that. But there was just a couple of things I wanted to mention, really. The main one is that, to give you an example, yesterday I had to phone a washing machine company because my washing machine broke down. I went through in the usual options and that, but one option that it gave me, which was really useful, it said the waiting time is 11 minutes. Press 1 and we'll phone you back sometime, you know. So I did that, and they phoned back about half an hour later. So my first question really, and I'll give you the second point as well, because they're both really connected, is that an option that you've looked at and you could maybe take up? Because I know you're never going to be quiet as a contact centre, but there are periods you must be quieter, where if it's a non-emergency, you could phone back, you know, the customer or constituent. My second point is I received, like many other people, council tax letter through the post, and in it was a little leaflet saying, you know, renew your brown bin. I just felt that that might have been an opportunity to put a leaflet in regarding the contact centre, saying, look, why do you need to contact? Here are a list of options. And the main reason I'm thinking that is, although there are online options, quite a number of people out there don't use the computer or don't go online. So you would actually target them and help achieve your objective of reducing the call numbers down of the contact centre. So that was my two questions connected.
Thank you, Convener. Your first point around taking a message and calling them back, we have actually trialled that before a few years ago, and it didn't work particularly well at that point in time for various reasons, mainly due to staff resource call volumes at the time, that we were never quiet enough, as you said, to have the time to call them back. It isn't something that's completely off the agenda, and it's something that we will probably explore again to see if it fits with our business now. Yep. Sorry, remind me what your second point was.
It was really just the letters with the council tax, little leaflets inside. It's an opportunity to reach people that you wouldn't normally reach.
Yes. What we do find is that people find us. So they do call the contact centre and manage to get the number. And that's when we went to the golden number, it's called the 50, 60, 70. People tend to know that number. I'm not sure if you're suggesting that we would be putting in alternative numbers for other services.
No, what I'm thinking about is you must be receiving some calls where people could find other routes to getting their questions answered. There must be a percentage of your calls which are not really the kind of calls that you expect to get. you know, people saying, why has this happened? Why has that happened? So if you give them clear directions, in other words, if it's, you know, a particular service you want, go to the contact centre, press option 1, press 2. If it's related to general information, there's another source. It's to minimise the number of calls that you really shouldn't be getting.
Yeah, all the calls come in through the telephony, and there is the menu that's shown in the report there. But certainly, it's something to think about, including that and explaining to people in advance so that they know which options they will be offered and could be selected when they make the phone call.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Provost.
Thanks very much, Councillor Flynn. I would just like to ask a question on the NEC housing management system. Is that being launched, or is it not fully live yet?
It's hoping to be launched in May, which will allow people to report the repair directly online and then be able to track the progress of the repair online. And we, from the contact centre perspective, are hoping that that would make a difference to call volumes. So people would not necessarily have to phone the contact centre to find out what's happening with the repair. And also they will be able to, at the point of contact, select a date and time that suits them for their appointment.
And another question I just wanted to ask was about services or changes like such as the budget. Do you get the feedback like we've had a budget, you know, the council tax went the way what it did, and be prepared for the calls coming in? So are services feeding into the call centre to prepare you for?
The dialogue with services is definitely better. We obviously ourselves monitor the budget reports and look for what is it we want, what is it we're looking out for, what is likely to drive additional call volumes. But the fact that we've set up the quarterly meetings with services to discuss the performance in relation to their calls is another dialogue where we're looking at what's coming down the line, what might impact on us.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor McCabe.
Thanks, convener. Again, just echoing the two questions that you'd asked there, Provost. I was going to ask, has communication between services improved? Anne-Marie, yes, undoubtedly has, which is very pleasing to hear. It was something that we did identify when we went on the visit to say, you know, had the service been aware of, you know, wheelie bin changes or whatever, they can seek some information before getting that avalanche of calls coming in. So that's very pleasing to hear that that's actually happening. My wee question, I suppose, it follows up on your first question, Provost, where it's to do with the NEC housing management system. You're suggesting it's coming in May. That's phase 5. Within the report here at 5.10, it mentions phase 1 and phase 2 of the integration of the system. Give me a wee bit of insight into that, Anne-Marie. What was that to do? Is it preparatory works for the rollout of this? Have you found any? Has it had any impact on the call centre at all?
Thank you. The first phases of the modules were really a housing management system. So it was all about loading on information around stock, loading on information about tenants, etc., and giving them access to maybe look at their housing account, etc. So it didn't have so much of an impact on the contact centre per se. These additional modules that we're tagging onto it now to maximise the capability of the system are the ones that will start to impact on contact centre volume.
That's great. Thanks very much. It explains it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Kelly.
Could I just ask, Provost had asked about how oncoming things at Fairway Contact Centre. Was there any change, or did you have a lot of calls after the budget?
No, the contact centre don't seem to have been inundated with calls because we were looking for that. No, is the answer.
Sorry.
I can just highlight that there should be an extra RAP code because the number of calls to councillors went through the roof.
Aye.
It's a bit remiss of me not to thank Jim Miller and Carly Toland for their excellent support during the scrutiny panel. All the reports they produced, and the information was always timely, so thank you very much for that. And
Here, here.
I'll now just go over to Mr. Perry.
Thank you. Just to say, the recommendations from the panel are set out in section 2, and there's, you acknowledged earlier on, 12. Perhaps just to note that the final recommendation is to get a further report once that the NEC housing system is bedded in, which was discussed earlier, to get a report back and just to see what the performance of the contact centre is. I think with your suggestion, January 2026 for that report. Ask if members agree.
Agreed?
Agreed.
Convener, can I just ask one wee question? Sorry about this. It's to do with paragraph 11 of the recommendations. Lifetime contact centre call handling information. Has that actually happened as yet, or is it in the process?
We haven't made it live yet. You know, I guess we were waiting on a decision here, but it's something that we can easily do. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. So there's 12 recommendations. Recommended the scrutiny panel considers recommendations. It was recommended the scrutiny committee considers recommendation of the scrutiny panel. So there's 12. So can we agree with the recommendation?
Agreed.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and thanks everybody for your time. Thank you very much.